Beavers have been absent from the UK for hundreds of years. That was of course until a pair had been spotted along the River Otter in Devon back in 2008. Why did they disappear, and how did they make it back without a formal reintroduction? And have they been making a splash? Recently there's been some really positive news for English beavers. On the 1st of October 2022, beavers were given full legal protection in England. This news has been a long time coming, and it's something which simply wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the first beavers of Devon and their story, which you're going to learn all about in this video. And for years now, I've been longing to see some beavers in the wild in the UK, so early one Thursday morning I set off and headed to the River Otter in the hope of scoring some beaver action. While I'm en route to Devon, let's understand why the beavers disappeared from the UK in the first place. The Eurasian beaver is native to Britain, but it was hunted to extinction by the 16th century for its water-resistant fur, which was used to make hats, and its scent glands, which were used in perfumes, food and medicine. Because of this, they were wiped out, and what we lost wasn't just an iconic, unique animal, but one that does wonders for the ecosystem. After a relatively smooth journey, I arrived on the River Otter around midday, which is kind of the worst time to see beavers as they are crepuscular, meaning they're most active at dawn and at dusk, and through the night. So with my head torch in my bag, I was mentally preparing to stay out for the night. But it wasn't long before I got my first sightings of beaver activity. Okay, that old tree which they felled, this happened a long time ago. There's a full-on tree that's come down. Boom, there you go, look, limb down on the tree. Again, here we go, another old one. How can they chew through that?
That's actually a very good question, Rob. You see, beaver's teeth are literally made of iron. There's actually two substances in a beaver's tooth, dentin and iron. Dentin is much softer, and that's at the back, and it continuously grows, but the iron comes down the front, so with all the gnawing, that iron forms into like a sharp chisel shape.
More signs of beavers. This is like quite a recent one. Beavers. Beaver signs. Signs of beavers. Beavers have just absolutely decimated, gone to town. That's mad. More signs of beavers. No, I'm joking. This one actually just looks like it's windblown. Looks like there's a decaying fungus here, Ganoderma. Look at this, look. Beavers. This looks like prime beaver habitat in here. So all of this gnawing, biting and felling of trees is the main reason why we get excited or sometimes frustrated about beavers. For me, they're one of the creatures most deserving of the title ecosystem engineer. A beaver feels safe in the water. It's how they enter and exit their dens, where they nurse their young. And it's how they access food, always with a safe retreat back into the water. It's in their instinct to stop that flow of running water by building dams, which increases the area and depth of water before the dam. Dam building brings opportunities for the landscape, but also conflicts in the wrong areas. A working beaver is a happy beaver. For the surrounding ecology, it's like rocket fuel. Before we learn all about how the beavers have been impacting Devon, let's see how I'm getting on looking for them. After walking all the way down to the estuary, I decided to head back into town and take a little break. I mean, after all, the beavers weren't going to be out until dusk anyway. That beer was known as Otter Bitter. I think I feel a little bit lightheaded after that. Let's remember, there was no formal introduction of beavers to Devon, at least not in the beginning. So how did two beavers make it back? Well, truth is, no one knows for sure, but there's two likely explanations. One is that they escaped from nearby enclosures. Sometimes as beaver kits mature, they feel the need to expand into their own territory. And the other theory is that they were illegally released. Now, if this was the case, it didn't really give the beavers the best chances, not least because they were a male and female who were closely related. What's your theory on this? Do you think it's just too much of a coincidence that beavers escaped into the perfect habitat? Or do you think that some beavers just wanted out? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Following the first sighting of beavers in 2008, kits were born in 2014. This sparked the government into action, and they initially planned to capture and remove the beavers. They feared that the beavers might be carrying a type of tapeworm that's not found in the UK. But thankfully, thanks to the Devon Wildlife Trust, the local community and numerous other organisations, they persuaded the government to wait until a 5-year trial period was over. Knowing just what good the beavers could bring to Devon, on a limited budget, the River Otter Beaver Trial began in 2015. To begin with, the beavers were trapped, ID'd, screened, tagged and released again. During the trial, an additional 5 beavers were released to ensure genetic diversity, and as suspected, the beavers spread out all across the River Otter and its tributaries. It's thought that there's at least 15 family groups currently up and down the river. Along smaller streams you'll find dams, and in the more open and deep parts of the river you'll find lodges and feeding sites. In total, over the 5-year trial, Beavers built 120 dams. Frogs love beavers. Now, I don't actually think there's ever been a direct romance between the two. I think that's biologically impossible, but anyway. A several-year study was conducted in Devon, pre-Beaver and after the Beaver's influence, where they counted the number of frog spawn. At the start, there was just 10 clumps, and after the 7 years, as the Beaver's influence grew, there was something like over 680 clumps of frog spawn. And frogs are used by ecologists as an indicator of ecosystem health. You know, they're a good meal for a lot of other creatures, and the habitat that they depend on is also good for a number of other creatures too. Beavers create ecotones on different scales. An ecotone is the transitional space between two habitats. It's this diversity in the structure and of the elements, the water, the trees and the mud that brings and creates opportunity for biodiversity. But what about fish? There's a common misconception that beavers eat them, which is not true. Beavers are herbivores. However, there is some interest in understanding how dams affect fish. For example, the brown trout, quite a territorial fish, has been very happy in the deep water before Devon's beaver dams. The study looked at how the sizes of fish varied in different habitats created by the beaver. Brown trout have been found elsewhere, but they've just been slightly bigger before the dam from literally floating and eating all the other smaller fish and invertebrates. One thing to bear in mind is that all of the fish co-evolved with beavers for millions of years, so they know how to live together. Beaver dams can grow very quickly, and they don't often show up in the areas that people want. They transition into large ponds within just a few months. Going through the River Otter Beaver Trial report, I found a case study where both the positives and the negative effects of beavers have been felt in just one area. In the village of East Budley, now this is a flood prone village. In the past 20 years, they've experienced 5 major flood events. Here, beavers moved in and they colonised a part of the river, and they built several dams in quite close proximity. This meant that the water was being held higher up the catchment, and in periods of high rainfall, it didn't all come streaming down into the village and flood it. And when our towns and our villages flood, it's not just an annoyance, but our homes and our businesses are destroyed, and it can cost millions, sometimes tens of millions of pounds of damage. The trade-off here was that the farmer's field was flooded, and he lost a proportion of his land, and he lost around £2,000 worth of annual profits. This is a great opportunity for the government to step in and provide payments to the farmers to provide these kinds of public services. While I was walking up and down the river, I was struck by the clarity of the water, by the number of different animals I saw, an array of birds, mammals, invertebrates and fish. As the day grew on and the sun got lower in the sky, I was hopeful my chances would increase and I'd finally see the beaver. I think that's my first beaver right there. It's got to be a beaver, isn't it? Is it an otter? What is that? Is it a fish? I think it's a fish. It's a freaking fish. Damn fish. It's trout. We're aware that beavers can sometimes cause conflicts in the landscape, but what are some of the solutions that have been used in Devon? A flow device has been used to control the height of the water behind beaver dams. It's just a protected pipe that passes through the dams and allows for the water to flow through, thus controlling any flooding. Trees can be protected using guards and crops can be protected using electric fencing, but what about when these measures aren't enough? In this situation, ideally, beavers would be translocated, but this relies upon there being another suitable site for them to go to, and when this isn't available, the discussion turns to culling. But with this new protection for the beavers, it means that landowners now need a license from Natural England to even touch beaver dams. So culling really will be a last resort, and something that we hope does not happen. So, how was I getting on spotting the beavers? Well, the sun had set and twilight had well and truly begun. As I was walking upstream, I saw a group of people standing still and they waved me over. I thought to myself, this could only mean one thing. And there they were. Through the undergrowth was an adult beaver with 2 kits. At first it was very hard to see them through all the vegetation, and my tripod only having 2 legs made it tricky to keep the camera steady, but I feel like I got some really nice footage of them. They were on the far bank eating some twigs, making the occasional little splash. But then the adult decided to head along to a recently felled willow. Remember that one we saw earlier in the day? Well, they were now beginning to strip each branch off and take it back to a safe place to eat. Soon it got so dark my footage was starting to get a little grainy, but I'd done it. I'd seen my first wild beavers here in the UK. A driving force of nature, such as a beaver, returning to our waterways really puts the debate on the table. How committed are we at making space for nature? Huge credit must go to those that ensured the River Otter Beaver trial was a success, but there's still a lot more work that needs to be done to get the beaver widespread and working with the modern day UK landscape. I hope we'll begin to see them more and more across the UK, but in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Leave curious. I'm now just kind of patrolling up and down, taking my time. The sun has nearly set. These guys are having a great time. That's the life, eh?